address first to Sven, but I'd like to address it to you three panelists.
Okay, we'll pretend to be Sven.
Okay, well,
Don't know that I can speak that away.
all right, so the better place concept, the idea of swappable batteries appeals to me as a consumer. The idea of a car share appeals to me as a consumer. The idea of electric car appeals to me. When are they going to mash that all up together?
Well, I mean, Better Place is the matchup of battery swap and electric car.
But don't you have to own your car?
So I'm not a fan of Better Place, although I went and visited them in Tel Aviv and got thought a little bit better about them afterwards. But one of the problems, I think, is that most of the innovation that's going on in the electric car right now is going on in the battery. And also most of the cost of a lot of these electric cars is in the battery, right? I don't know what percentage of the cost of your car is in the battery?
Most of it.
Yeah, exactly. So the problem with battery swap is it says there's only one customer for batteries, right? It's the battery swap company. You don't own your battery. You go in, you swap your battery at the battery swap company, they own it. It's really hard to make it work any other way with battery swap. And so I think it would be, just because it's bad to have only one supplier, I think it's bad to have only one customer. And so I'm a little scared of battery swap in that respect.
Now, my answer to that would be a little different. The red car that I showed you, the first battery I bought in there was 30 kilowatt hours, $25,000. Same battery right now is about $8,000. So if you're going to build a business model on something where it's that expensive, and in 5 years the price has gone from 30,000 down to 8,000, you know, your business case is disappearing. I look at it a lot like memory was in the 80s and the PCs. I could buy a bunch of RAM for $12,000, and a month later I could buy the same RAM for $6,000. There's so much development going on, and that's just in the business case model. In the real case is how do you get a battery that's that consistent for every vehicle. Every car I've built has had a different voltage, a different controller. Nobody's going to standardize on how the interface works and how much current it's going to draw. It doesn't seem practical to me.
So my approach is actually to let you have the electric car, but instead of battery swap, vehicle swap. And what I mean by that is sort of what I told you about using the right vehicle for the trip. Which is if you need to go a really long distance, well then for those trips, pull out a liquid fuel vehicle. Liquid fuels still have the best energy density, and batteries are still a ways away from getting there. Someday they might, but for now they don't. But for most of your trips that are short trips, that's where the electric vehicle is great. And if for some reason you plan badly, you change your mind in the middle of the trip, well then you just pull into the parking lot, and already waiting there 3 feet away is another vehicle with more range. You grab your briefcase, you get it, and you go. So you didn't have to swap the battery, and then your vehicle goes back and find somebody to recharge it or swap its battery. So it might make more sense, especially when the battery is so much of a fraction across the vehicle, just not bother with the expensive battery swap thing and just swap vehicles when the time's there for that.
I like the idea of I like the idea of personal power of when I feel like getting in my car and going somewhere I can do it.
Yeah.
With your car swap, if I feel like getting in a car to take a trip, how long do I have to wait from the car to find me wherever I am and get to me?
Well, if we have even a fraction of the density of cars we have today, I mean, look around here, right? Most of those cars are sitting there and basically they're used 2 hours a day or less, and they spend the vast portion of their lives just sitting in parking lots. If we had anything like this density of cars, you'd have one within between 1.5 and 2.5 seconds, all right, in terms of, you know, if these cars are available for hours. So the reality is we'll probably have a lot less cars.
Well, that's true if I'm sitting here and I want to go, if I'm at my house and, you know, from my house I don't see...
There's still 100 cars within probably a 20-second drive of your house right now.
In other words, it's going to be in somebody else's garage and we'll have to...
Well, I actually don't think we'll continue to have 100 cars within a 10-second drive of our houses anymore. Some people are going to want to own a car like they do today, right? And so they're not going to stop them. They're going to own a car. They're going to let anyone touch that car. That car sits near their house. It comes to them the moment they summon it. Maybe if they're stupid, they still have a driveway and a garage, and they actually keep it in there. But most people won't. I don't think. I think we'll find other better uses for those rooms now that we have them. But other people will say, I don't want to own a car. I'm just going to hire a car, and that's going to depend on what company you go to hire the car. You may go in to something that's like a Google, and it's, you know, it searches all the companies for you. It says, okay, I found a car that's 30 seconds away from you. It's not the perfect car for you, or would you rather wait a minute and get the perfect car for you, and you'll choose.
A a lot of the car companies now, what they want to do is have like a membership in their brand.
Yeah.
So you just,
You subscribe to Volvo, you don't buy a Volvo, you
Yeah.
subscribe. I've imagined also, like, it doesn't have to be a car company. You could have a group of friends who create something called the Red Beamer Club, right? And maybe there's 50 of them and they own 15 red Beamers. And so they're always in a red BMW no matter where they go. They're maybe not in the same, maybe sometimes they're in a sportier one, sometimes they're in a luxury one. And if the club ever runs out, it just hires out temporarily from somewhere else who's got some BMWs so that they get that impression. And so now 50 people own 15 cars. It's a big win.
You do that with flying clubs right now.
Yeah, well, people do flying clubs all the time.
So there are a lot of rational arguments that are being put forth, and technical people tend to presume that the world might be a rational place. But I think when we're talking about business models, the encountering of real people demonstrates that their decision making is not just necessarily very rational. So although
no business plan survives first contact with the user.
right. So although you're describing a situation that's kind of interesting, I just spent the weekend driving around New England looking at leaves and pissed off that the rental car I had, and I couldn't rent a car that had a standard transmission. They all had automatic transmissions.
Yep.
And all my cars that I own that are on the West Coast all have standards. And I know it may not be rational to want a standard transmission instead of an automatic transmission, but having been driving for like 40 years, I really like them. So how will this scenario work with the mixed reality of that some people will want more control and other people will give away control? How will it play well together?
Well, the people who drive stick are probably not the first to have the car drive itself for them. They probably drive stick because they do like the feel of the engine in their hands. But for the other ways that cars will vary, that's just going to be, that's a business proposition, right? That's, will there be demand? And if there's demand, there will be companies that are willing to meet that demand. Now, what's different, though, is that you can get more efficient markets through computers, which we're getting in so many industries right now. And you get vehicles that can reposition themselves in response to or in anticipation of demand. So you start getting good demand management for the car hiring and car rental companies. They start knowing where the stick people who want sticks are going to be. So actually, your car with a stick may actually be able to drive itself, but for no other purpose than to move itself so that it's, because we know, okay, we got some whack jobs and want to drive through the fall colors in Maine, and let's make sure we get some stick cars up there, or you've ordered one that you ordered like 3 days ago, even if you ordered it 6 hours ago, even if it wasn't close to the place you want to pick it up, by then it is there. Right? So you have this ability to have this very fungible thing that moves around and flows, and so you can have much more efficient management or something like that. So, but yeah, people will be irrational. You're absolutely right about that. People will find every possible way to abuse the technology. As I said, the RV was just one example of that. Another great example from cars is it turns out that since the 80s, car engineers have made the internal combustion engine be 30% more efficient than it was in the 80s. And do you know how much the average fleet miles per gallon decreased because of that increased efficiency? It didn't. It went up 1 mile per gallon. It's worse than it was before. Because we took all that efficiency, we said, well, let's get SUVs, right? Let's get big, heavy cars. That's what we did with the efficiency.
So,
Pick someone.
So I have a similar question, but maybe slightly less irrational. So I think that this scenario works really well if the primary reason for using a car is for transportation to get from point A to point B. But I know a lot of people.
That is a popular use.
But there are situations where people almost use that as a second home. They store a lot of things in their car that they walk with them all the time. Do you ever come across that in your research?
Yeah, no. I mean, I've written a bunch of articles. As I said, some people are just going to say, I want one car just like I always did, right? And that's what they'll do. Now, these people won't do this, but some people will say, I want to own a better car than I can afford, and then I'll hire it out when I work, and so I can afford the better car. Those aren't the people who want to leave their car full of crap. The other thing I've sort of imagined, but this is entirely hypothetical, is that we might build standardized lockers that fit into slots in the trunks. And your car can, before it comes to get you, it can drop by the depot where you keep that locker, and you pick up the locker, and so it has that locker, and then when you switch to another car, you swap the locker in there, and you always have that big box of stuff. You'd have to keep it a little more organized than my trunk is to do it, but it's possible. But let's think about the fact that even though this, everyone talks about it, we just saw, of course, a nice dance number from Greece about love of the muscle car. And that's a very American ideal. But people in Manhattan are Americans too, and they've completely given up on this, right? They don't own cars. 3/4 of them don't own a car at all. And If you were born and raised in Pasadena and lived in a car all your life and never saw public transit, and you move to Manhattan, it takes you about a day, and you switch to doing it the way Manhattan does. It's not nearly as ingrained as people think.
So just putting on the lens of risk management and insurance companies and things like that, you know, in one state you have, you know, no fault insurance, and in another state you have fault insurance. Like, who's going to represent these cars? I mean, what's the sort of scenario planning you've done around?
Who do you sue?
There will be car accidents, and if you imagine the future where there's all cars that are driving on their own by robots, versus the mix that is right now where there's both, sort of what's that about with that lens in mind?
So actually, we're really, really good at understanding the cost of car accidents. There's a giant industry that's all about understanding that cost, and they hire rooms full of actuaries to figure out the probabilities of all that stuff. Anyone who makes accidents a rarer thing is going to be doing good, is going to reduce the cost of those accidents. If the courts don't decide they want to lay punitive damages that are more than, say, if a drunk guy had done it. So we actually know how to assess the cost if someone gets drunk and, you know, smashes into someone. And if we want to charge the company that made another mistake, a different kind of mistake, but with the same sad consequence, we want to charge them like 100 times more, then that's a problem. But if we want to charge them the same, well then, that's fine. Because if you think about it, we pay for accidents two ways right now. One is, the driver's responsible, and the driver has insurance, and their insurance company pays for the accident. The other is, that a mechanical failure is responsible, and so the company's insurance company pays for the accident, and the company charges the driver a bit more money to buy a car in order to deal with that. So who paid in both circumstances? It was the driver, the owner of the car, who paid. Neither, so it doesn't actually matter which one of those turns out to be the case. Whether it flows to the company or it flows to the insurance company, it's as long as the amount of money goes down, that's a win. So we are going to have people who, you know, because lawyers get paid a lot of money for this, it's their job, we paid a lot of money, try and figure out whether the money should flow through these people or through that people. But in the end, what matters is does less money flow, and that means we all save money when we buy vehicles and we buy insurance.
Sorry, I'm not talking much.
You can ask him about his electric car, he should. Looks like a cool car.
I have a question for both of you guys too, is this whole notion of psychology. It seems like the biggest barrier for both of you is overcoming people's psychological preconceptions of what could be in the mix of some.
By the way, I should mention, someone said, what are you going to do? What's your policy meeting? So I am not talking for Google here, right? I'm a consultant there. I'm not their spokesman. This is a talk I actually gave before I started working with them. By and large, I talk about the Google project because it's the most advanced project, but don't think I'm answering about what Google's plans are before we get into this. If you want to answer about the psychology,
I missed it. Could you run it by me? I didn't hear it.
Oh, just you're always trying to sort of overcome people's psychology. You know, I took a Tesla out for a spin, and instantly I was converted to an electric car. Like, this is the greatest thing ever.
because it pins you to the back of your seat.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a completely perfect response to my foot. I would just mash it and just go, and then let go and it just stop.
Yes, cool.
And so, you know, how do you sort of overcome people's psychology?
So it's really experience.
Stops cooking.
I started taking, is this working?
Yeah.
I started taking those cars on the road, I took them to shows, and everybody said, well, I gotta have the same thing I have now. I wanna drive 300-400 miles, I don't wanna do anything, I don't wanna wash it, I don't wanna go to all the trouble of plugging it in every day, although they don't mind going to the gas station and plugging it in for 10 minutes. But as the years have gone by, people have gotten a lot more logical about what they expect out of an electric car. And they've also started educating themselves about how often they really drive and what they drive. And I teach a class, and I have students fill out the first week of class. I have them do a driving log. Where do you drive? Is there opportunity charging there? Can you plug in? You'd be surprised how many plugs there are around the world. And how many passengers are in the car, and what do they carry with them? And then we sit down and design the car. And we designed the car, and the car is, I need to be able to carry 4 people. I need my drums, my guitar, and my skis, and maybe a book. and I need to go 200 miles. And we start designing that car, and then we say, well, all right, let's talk about it. I'm not going to lay anything on you. Let's just talk about how much it's going to cost to build this car. So we start talking about the cost of the battery, the size of the car, and we design it all out, and it's astronomical. And then we look at the surveys, and every survey says, well, I drive 2 miles, I go back, I have my books with me, I'm always alone, and I never drive more than 10 miles.
You sound like really lonely people.
They're students, they're going back and forth to school. But they have in their mind what they think they need is this totally utilitarian vehicle that solves everything, and they can take all their friends with them. But what they really need is something that'll take 10 miles. And that gets back to the point that you brought up about you gotta have the vehicle you want. I tell people if you want to go to Tahoe, rent a 4-wheel drive vehicle and go to Tahoe. If you want to drive around town, you buy an electric car and you drive. Yeah.
Although they won't do it, right? Because, I mean, people
are now doing it.
It's a hassle to go and rent that 4-wheel drive compared to, people imagine us, they seem to be willing to spend a fortune to just have it in their driveway and get it and go, compared to the hassle of going to a car rental office or having the car rental office do the delivery. But I want to answer about the psychology because something interesting. Well, 2 things. One about electric cars and one about self-driving cars. So the Japanese did an interesting project in Tokyo where people were having trouble buying the electric cars, and they were all worried about the range and they weren't taking them out. So what they did was they installed a series of rapid charge stations, not level 3, but level 2 charge stations in a bunch of places around Tokyo, and said, send everybody, here's a map, there's these charge stations you can charge. And suddenly people started taking their cars out, a whole bunch, and they were having a great time. And how much were they using the charge stations? Almost not at all. Right? It was simply the existence of the charge station, the feeling that they didn't have to worry that actually made the difference. So the one thing I'll tell you about self-driving cars is actually the reverse of what most people expect, which is people are way too trusting. So I actually know the car's a prototype right now and not perfect yet, but we put you in this car for like a test ride and you are a believer, right? You're suddenly, you would pick up a newspaper or have sex with your girlfriend while this thing was driving. And you shouldn't trust it that much yet, but it's amazing how much people are willing to switch over and trust it, how much people are willing to change. People who said, I'm down, well, I could never believe this would happen. Human beings, once they see something work once, they believe it works all the time. That's actually going to be too optimistic, but it's not going to be a problem convincing people that they might like the test.
I don't even trust automatic transmissions.
There's some people that just aren't convinced. There was a guy that came to me and said he had to have a car that he could drive to Vegas. I was in LA at a car show. He says, I got to drive to Vegas. If my car won't go to Vegas, I can't own it. So I asked him when the last time he drove to Vegas was. He said, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago. But that was his mentality. That was his psychology.
By the way, I drove a stick for the first 15 years of my life, and when I finally bought an automatic car, I got one that has the little manual. You can make it manual. You know how many times I put it in the manual gear? It's like 3, I think.
So your discussion about the actual trips people make made me think about your car that costs $15,000. It's mostly battery costs, but it goes 100 miles. I take my kids to school, I go to the office, I go to the grocery store. What would the battery cost that can get you 10 miles? In fact, 10 miles round trip. What's that battery cost? What's that car cost?
Yeah, it's a lot less. It's a lot less. I don't even know. I haven't gotten that far, but it's considerably less. We'd probably build it at about half the price for the battery because I wouldn't build one for 10 miles because you never know when you have to go 5 miles to work and then come back immediately or something. So 10 miles would be a little restrictive. I have built those cars. I built the whole car for $6,000. It would do 10 miles.
Okay.
So they are kind of lying about the range sometimes in electric cars, not about you, but all the other vendors unfortunately do, in terms of people's actual driving behaviors. But the other issue is that you actually don't want to drain a battery down to near the end of its reserves. That's actually a little bit bad for the battery. So you typically want to do the cycle so that your typical day's driving is probably not going to discharge it more than about half, maybe 60%. So nobody's really going to build a 10-mile car.
But then that means that your battery can handle a lot more than 100 miles if it doesn't empty the battery.
Well, we use 80% of the life of the battery, so we don't overdrain it or we don't overcharge or over-discharge. So when I say 100 miles, you can actually drive 100 miles. If you went 75 miles an hour, you go about 45 to 50 miles. If you drove 40 miles an hour, you might get 120 miles. It's all watt hours per mile. We have about a 20 kilowatt hour pack. This vehicle's at about 155 watt-hours per mile, so it's very, very efficient.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Even with the horrible coefficient of drag that it has.
Yeah, the Leaf's about 270 and the Tesla's about 230.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, the spirit of tonight, let's think about Joe Sixpack, who doesn't give a crap about the environment. And the only reason that he would buy an electric car is if it was cheaper than a combustion engine.
Very interesting. One of the slides I sometimes use is back to when Volkswagen and Honda started selling cars in the early 50s. They had to overcome tremendous obstacles to try to sell their vehicles. First, we were shooting at them just a few years before. Second, the Volkswagen brought like the ugliest car in the history of man. Honda showed up with a car that wasn't much bigger than this table. And they had a hard time finding people that would sell them because they had to overcome the shooting at each other kind of thing. But Honda started selling their Honda Civic through the motorcycles. It had a 650cc motorcycle engine in it, so motorcycle dealers started selling the Civic. The Volkswagen Bug took off in the early 50s. I had a 56 Chevy, which was absolutely gorgeous. Compared it to a 56 Bug, which was the first car I ever did. It was less than $10,000 to convert. But those cars really took off, and that's because it was the lowest cost per mile transportation available. And that's kind of what the Switch is doing. We're at about a penny a mile for energy, if you use PG&E's rates.
Well, because I've looked at brochures on electric cars, and they quote PG&E rates, except where I live, there's tiers of rates.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure.
and they're saying, okay, well, the rate is 10 cents, but I'm looking at my marginal cost. If I have an electric car, it's going to be 35, 40 cents per mile.
I pay 43 cents as my top tier. But if you have an electric car, you sign up for PG&E rate. Sometimes you have to put another meter in, but you get your electricity at 5 cents a kilowatt hour. I think, actually, I take it back. It was 5, now it's 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour. For your metered PG&E time during specific hours. So you charge your car from 10 o'clock at night till about 4 in the morning, and you get this really cheap rate. That's the only way you can do it around here.
You had a question?
Yeah, I wonder, instead of trying to accommodate all these different preferences and different drivers, is there a way to get these cars on the road in kind of a hybrid between a taxi where you can go from point A to point B and your public transportation, which doesn't always cover all the routes? So say in Boston, New York, San Francisco, in a small city downtown, to create several routes that a lot of people use, and then to have kind of, people know, okay, these are where these self-driving cars are. It's going to cost less than a taxi, a little bit more than transportation or whatever it is, so that people can start using it. Because in countries like parts of China and Chile, they have these in between that's cheaper than a taxi, but it's better than a bus. And so these drivers just drive around this route, and I can flag down anybody and get onto a point, and then get close enough that I can get there. And I think in major cities there are commuters who need that service, and then that way it's kind of, you can work out certain problems, and also people can be exposed to these new technologies.
Yeah, I mean, in the richer world, people tend to be willing to spend the money for private transportation, and they don't want the inconvenience of sharing transportation with people. That's going to become even more interesting when we've got a system where the individual transportation is more energy efficient than the public transportation. Now the public transportation in the US is really bad. The average bus in the United States uses more energy per passenger mile than the average car, and the light rail in San Jose uses more than an SUV in terms of the amount of energy per passenger. But that's because you've probably seen that light rail and you noticed there wasn't anyone else on it. So I actually believe in the long term we'll probably move away from the mass transit, except during rush hour when we need the absolute highest capacity when those trains actually are efficient. But other people believe in using self-driving cars as what they call last mile solutions to the train. So that indeed come to the train station and then you can get this little thing to take you that last mile, and it makes the train much more suitable for you. And at rush hour, in fact, I do see that happen.
And In my home country, Brazil, everyone goes to work in a Mercedes bus.
My dream is to just get rid of parking lots. You drive to a city and you have this area where you park, which is a parking lot, of course, but then everything becomes mass transit inside the city. I'm not at all in dispute with the 60% of the earth is being used in Los Angeles to support automobiles. It's crazy. So I fight against every parking lot there is in the hopes of getting more people on mass transit.
So, I mean, you can try and legislate that way. I mean, the reality seems to be that most people, once they get a certain level of wealth, they don't want to ride mass transit. Even the Chinese are, you know, what's the dream now of the Chinese middle class is when you can get your own car.
Buick, they love Buick.
Yeah. And it's not because they don't have, haven't grown up. In fact, they used to ride bicycles everywhere, and in Beijing now the bicycle lanes have been torn up and to make more car lanes, in spite of the pollution and so on that's going on there. So I think really what you have to do is people are going to do what they want to do. However, if you're lucky, you can design it in a way. I sort of say that people want something that's better and faster and cheaper and greener, and they don't really care about that last one. But if you can do something that's better, faster, and cheaper, and is also greener, you'll actually improve the world.
Let's hear from the dancer.
Can I make a comment in defense of mass transit? Because I think in Japan, British people also ride the subway in Tokyo.
They do, but East Japan Rail, which you'll agree is a very efficient transportation system, uses about 1,000 BTUs per passenger mile is how when you convert it in to the funny American, the British thermal unit, which is used only in the US. His car is, you put 2 people in your car and you're definitely better than that. And with 1 person in your car, you're just a little bit worse. And so that's the Japanese, and they're really good at mass transit. Well, here's the problem. So trains are not full all the time, right? Now, we happen to...
I've been there, they're pretty full.
The Japanese are... In rush hour, absolutely. They're shoving you in. It's a big... So, but let's take a commuter train in rush hour that's going into a downtown, right? So that train is packed with people by the time it gets close to downtown. At the beginning of the line, it's empty. Well, they don't though, right? People want to ride transit. They want to know that they can take that transit back when not too far off the time they want to go. So they want a train to go every
5 minutes.
That's right. So they want a train every 5 minutes because if you didn't run the trains and they'd say, oh, I'm not sure I can ride the transit because I'm going to have to wait an hour for a train. If you weren't running, or even if you didn't run them during the middle of the day, people wouldn't want to ride it because they'd say, oh, I can't go back when I want to. Right? So but let's take that train that's going in full. Right? But it starts at the beginning of the line empty. And it gets fuller and fuller and fuller, it goes down. So its average load is probably a little better than half. So that's the average load of a packed, full morning rush hour train. And then that train goes back into the burbs with a very light load along the whole trip. So that one train, even at rush hour, even packed to the gills, is actually about 1/3 full for its total out and back.
Well, but then you make it smaller. I mean, you can still be smart about it.
But they don't, right? Well, at least in the US they don't, and even the Japanese don't. That's what this number comes from. The average bus in the US has 9 people on it, and the average train car in the United States has 23 people on it. And that's because you don't think that because the cars that don't have very many people on them, you're not on them, you're not seeing it. No one's on those, and so your sampling error is you think that trains are full because more people are on full trains to observe full trains.
But so I think you're not being honest because.
Well, I didn't make up these numbers. These numbers come from the Department of Energy. They come from the Japan Rail Company.
So the problem with trains is that you need a high level of organization. But the same is true for your car share. You also need a lot of infrastructure of actually getting this to work with lots of cars and sharing.
But not centralized. You can have 100 competing companies with real innovation and competition. So municipal governments do not innovate. They do not really adopt. The technology of those trains, we think about in California, we're going to build this futuristic bullet train. It's from 1980, the technology that's going to be in that train that's going to be running here in 2030, right? The Japanese had something almost as good in 1964. Yeah, all right? It wasn't quite as fast as the California one. There was a little bit of improvement, but there were trains as fast as the California one in the 80s. And that's so 50 years later, we're going to have this modern train taking us from downtown San Francisco to downtown LA. How many people go from downtown San Francisco to downtown LA?
But why aren't you giving a talk about the really modern train?
You mean like the one they have in Shanghai?
Wow, something as good as.
But the point is, I'm not making these numbers up. Like you can go and the Department of Energy goes and calculates. So they go to the transit system like BART and New York Muni and all these others and say, what was your electricity bill? Right? No line, just how many kilowatt hours did you buy? All right, how many passenger miles did you deliver tickets? They divide the numbers. They get a result. Now what they do is they do convert the kilowatt hours of electricity to energy at the power plant. And this is one of the things that maybe is a little bit confusing because some people say we want to compare the electric energy is more efficient because the electric cars use 90% of the electricity that's in their batteries, and gasoline cars only use about 35% of the energy that's in their gas. But the electric cars got their electricity from natural gas that was burned at a power plant, or it went through a nuclear plant or a hydro plant and so on. Here in California, Northern California, it's almost all natural gas and a bit of hydro. Down south, they got some nuke, and they got, again, mostly natural gas. There's almost no coal here in California, which is good. Go to Utah or Arizona, it's all coal, right? It's powering the electric transportation. So this surprised me when I saw the numbers, and it took me a while to figure out how can it be. So this, like you take that streetcar. That streetcar weighs, I think, 160,000 pounds, right? With 23 people on it. And it's starting and stopping and starting and stopping. Now compare that to his car, which weighs what, 1,600, 1,200 pounds? 1,300 pounds. His car weighs 1,300 pounds, and you put two people in it, and it's not starting and stopping except for the red lights. It's just going directly where it is. Well, what's actually going to be more efficient? Right? That 100,000 pound streetcar or his little, there's more iron per person in the streetcar. So our intuition is that mass transit should be more efficient because we're all gathering together. But we're also, we have to wait for it, we have to do transfers, we get scared away from it, and in the US, the load factors aren't there. So the Japanese and the European, and the Chinese even more in Hong Kong, they are much better than the US. But the reality of the US is that the load factors are low, and I don't see what in the future is going to make those load factors higher. I think the reverse is going to happen because there's going to be cheaper, more efficient person transportation.
So off the mass transit thing, though, I'm a New Yorker and I grew up in New York and I still drove my car to Manhattan and everywhere. So it's not rational, but I did because
that's a little freaky. Where do you park it?
I like to drive a lot, so I did. But the question I have for you is: last Tuesday in the Wall Street Journal, there was a kind of mainstream article that the three of you noticed it about this exact topic, where because this conversation doesn't occur in the main public very much, but it was on the cover of the technology section of the Wall Street Journal last Tuesday, and the person who wrote the article said two or three things that I'm wondering, did either of the three of you see this?
I mean, I read probably a dozen articles a week on the topic, so I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
So he basically brought up two or three facts that I wonder if they sound like they're right to you. He said that the percentage of people who were of college age who got driver's licenses dropped from about, there are now about 30% of college students who do not have a driver's license today.
So it is true. It is the age at which people are getting driver's license is dropping.
And it used to be 13% like 20 years ago. Yeah. But he also said, talking about the driverless car based on Jerry Brown's name on Google.
Yeah.
He said that the safety records will be so much better with the driverless car that the people who insist on driving their own cars will have to pay such a larger amount for insurance that there'll be a lot of peer pressure pushing people out of being able to drive their own cars because the safety numbers will be so different that the economies of scale and the insurance companies will basically gang up so the public can't drive anymore. And he was, in this article in the Wall Street Journal, pretty mainstream publication, putting forth the concept that, and this will not be a problem, that society will very willingly give up driving as soon as they're faced with getting those hours back that they were unproductive. So I'm just wondering, do you think this guy was a little exaggerated? I mean, you seem to be on that path, but it's a pretty mainstream.
I mean, I think it's many decades until we start seeing that kind of pressure to make it. I mean, I don't think we make it illegal to drive.
He said 25 years. He said about 25.
I don't think we make it illegal. So there's a couple events that might happen that would cause that. One event would be right now we actually have things where I'm more worried about. There's going to be an accident, and the lawyers are going to say the self-driving car software was faulty and it hurt this person. Pay up lots of money, and everyone's trying to figure what will happen when that happens. But actually, what will happen at some point is there's going to be an accident, and the lawyers for the other guy are going to say, you know what? If you had the self-driving system in your car, you would not have hit this car, right? And we can prove that, we can demonstrate it. So you are liable for not having gotten this, for not having put on a self-drive, or worse, maybe the car company was liable for making a car that didn't have that level of safety feature. Right now, you know, your car company, you can't make one without seatbelts, right? And you can't even make one, and now they're talking about, you gotta have the right crumple zones, there's a million things that are in the FMVSS that you have to put in your car, and you're very liable if you don't put them in your car. So that might happen down the road. I don't know if that will, because I think this sort of decision might get punted out of the courts and into policy matter, and there's definitely a lot of people who have a love of driving who would not want to see that happen. I don't actually think your insurance rates would go up that much, actually. I think that everyone else's insurance rates will go down a lot. Not in California, there's a constitutional amendment that forbids low insurance rates in California. You're laughing, this is not a joke. It's absolutely true. It was passed in 1992. But you are going to, I think there'll still be a large enough pool of insurable drivers that you could get an insurance rate that's, you know, similar to what you have here. I mean, most insurance companies, not most, but a lot of the big insurance companies like State Farm and so on, are mutual insurance companies, right? The premiums are set by exactly how much they have in claims. And so if you get any large group of people and the claims are like the claims today, then the insurance shouldn't cost a lot more. But it could be, I actually think another thing might happen that will scare you, which is that this is again a 3 decades away kind of thing. We'll start seeing the cars being able to drive closer together on the road. And so what they'll, huh?
And the human won't be able to keep up.
Well, it's not that human won't want to keep up, it's that what will happen is the cars, I'm usually very down on all the proposals for cars to talk to each other, because that's not what you get to do first. The first car that gets on the road is pretty lonely, hasn't got anybody to talk to. Once you get a critical mass though where that can be useful, you start having the cars wanting to talk, and the main thing they want to know is, can I trust you? If I want to pack up close with you, is that going to work? Is your software certified by somebody I trust? Or are you one of my cousins? You know, and those cars will pack close together, but then they'll look at the other car and say, ping that car and say, ooh, who's driving that car? A human? Oh my God! Give him a big pile of room, and because he needs this pile of room, he'll pay more road tax because he needs more of the road, just to leave those margins that humans need that the robots don't need. But again, this is a 3 day, you're dead by the time it's happened, so don't worry about it.